It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mainz and Dutts. I'm your host, Mainz, and my colleague in the Danger Zone in Rainford. It's Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
It's getting dangerously warmer, which is always a good thing this time of year.
Hay fever season is upon us, so the reason that you're sneezing is not the cold, it's the pollen. What a winner. What a winner we are all involved in.
Take Piriton.
Yeah, exactly right, exactly.
Not Pirites, Piriton.
Thank you for that. I don't know if that was a sponsorship idea or whatever, but if we were ever going to be sponsored, it'd be something like that.
Yeah, all the hay fever, all the hay fever tablets are available, but they're crap.
This week, we're focusing on draft again, and Neil is talking to Thor Nystrom, tight end draft. So Neil, right in his element, talking to Thor of NBC Sports Edge, and I guess formerly Roto World. I assume we'll stop calling it Roto World eventually when it, has been Sports Edge for 15 years.
Look, there are still people referring to a tunnel under the Mersey that was opened in 1972 as the new tunnel.
Fair. That is one for the kids there, and local as fuck. We will also be doing top 5 fantasy winners and fantasy losers. Free agency has been crazy. We'll briefly discuss at the top of the show. And because there's been that much stuff, what we thought we'd do, because we are, a fantasy show in some thought for, we'd look at the top 5 fantasy winners and losers of the free agency period so far, which doesn't look like a baiting, when the basically top 2 wide receivers are traded, when quarterbacks move like, it's
never
swapping panini stickers circa 1994. The world's gone a bit crazy, and I guess, Neil, the best way to start is have you ever seen the likes of it? Is this like a domino? Have you ever seen that meme of the guy pushing the small domino that makes it into the big massive domino? Is this like Bill O'Brien got really annoyed with Nuke Hopkins pushes one, and now Tyreek Hill is a Miami Dolphin right at the very top?
Well, it is weird because, as you say, it's free agency, but the big moves aren't free agent moves. They're trades. And, the NFL for a long time wasn't really big on trading. There was only Belichick and Howie who did it. But whereas now everyone, as you say, they saw that Bill O'Brien basically sold everything for a bag of beans. And now everyone's like, do you know what? You've had 2 contracts out of us. You're not getting another one. Off you go. And yeah, it's wild. I mean, it's also the fact that I'm fairly confident there's going to be a distinctly ordinary quarterback team in the NFC Championship game this year, because everything seems to have gone to the AFC. Because the NFC at the moment is it's Brady, Rodgers, Stafford. I'm not missing anyone, am I? Dak?
No, I
Kyler?
know. Like if I was talking yesterday, and I was like, is the reason that the Falcons kind of punted was, 1, they didn't get the quarterback that they wanted, and 2, they thought, oh look, Tom Brady's back, so we may as well not try anyway.
But the Falcons never thought they would get there, man. They went into the negotiation and pissed off the greatest player in franchise history, knowing they weren't going to get him. Bullshit.
Yeah, it's not great. For those who want to listen to a eulogy of Matt Ryan's time in Atlanta, please listen to the Touchdown Review where Thomas Willoughby does a wonderful note. If I was a proper producer, I would have put Simon Bates' song underneath. I didn't, because it would have took too long and I couldn't really be bothered. What we will say is, before we talk to Thor, is 2 things. One, the Urban Meyer story is objectively hilarious and objectively sickening at the same time. The thought that he didn't know half the NFL players blows my mind, but then again, at the same time, I'm not shocked because I watched him coach in the NFL. It means that I am officially out on every single college coach joining the NFL, and I now don't trust Nick Saban in any way, shape, or form.
The thing as well that you have to bear in mind is that who was the last college coach to come and be a sustained success in the NFL? Because I was going to say, it's got to be Jimmy, because Pete was an NFL coach first.
Correct.
Then went to USC and had a professional team playing for him. Sue me. He had a professional team playing for him.
I mean, you and the NCAA agree, and if you want to be on the side of the NCAA, you carry on.
So who are the other college coaches we can think of? Chip Kelly, 3 years. One playoff appearance, one missed out the second last week, then fell apart.
Made loads of friends. And didn't deal very well with professional players.
Yeah. Bobby Petrino. Yeah. Falcons fans thought, you think this is hard? You had it harder. Steve Spurrier. You remember that?
Ball coach.
Yeah, the old ball coach with his, was it fun and gun? No, it just means you're playing golf, mate.
This is the thing, right? And I think you've highlighted two college coaches who were successful, Pete Carroll and Jimmy Johnson, who both ran NFL franchises in college. For those who haven't watched the U, watch it, and then watch it again because it's awesome, and then watch it again because it's awesome, and then remember they once went to a game, came off a plane in army fatigues because they said they were going to war.
What was that? Was that the Convicts v Catholics?
I think so. Which now has its own 30 for 30 on Disney Plus.
Yeah, I mean, so, and then you look. So Urban Meyer was beyond a failure. Matt Rule isn't exactly winning any friends or plaudits because he said he went into an interview and said analytics, and that apparently makes you success. Now, yeah, the college to the NFL, and plus as well, you have to remember the most successful college coaches. I suppose we are forgetting Jim Harbaugh, but again, he came in, burned himself out very quickly, and got old very quickly, and went back to where he knew.
Correct. Good point.
So college coaches tend to get paid more than NFL. I mean, I personally, just from my experience of playing, it's quite ironic really because it's a game he still talks about an awful lot, Thor Nystrom. My experience of playing NCAA football on the PlayStation 3, the recruiting bit, I couldn't be doing with it. It was like, I'm just going to sim this and I'll just play. Okay, but this is, I know I need to attract people to come and play for the Akron Zips under me, but I'd really rather just let someone else do that.
The other story, obviously, is Deshaun Watson. Me and Neil have thoughts. I have mentioned them briefly on the touchdown review. I think Thomas and Joe mentioned them either this week or last week. At present, we both believe that we won't be talking about him on this show. We don't believe he should be in the NFL right now. So therefore we'll not be talking about him for this period going forward because we don't necessarily believe on this show that it's appropriate.
No.
So without further ado, what we're going to do now is get Thor Nystrom on the phone. Get him to talk tight end draft with Neil. As you can tell, I'm not here, so this is a pre-recorded segment. Enjoy.
Absolutely delighted, I can't even say the words, absolutely delighted to be joined by Thor Nystrom of NBC Sports Edge, formerly Rote World. He's a senior content creator there for college football, NFL draft, an FSWA and Rolling Stone award winner. You can follow him on Twitter, like I do, at ThorKU. Thor, thanks very much for agreeing to spend some time chatting with me today.
Honoured to join you, Neil.
No, you're far too kind. You can come again straight away before you even say anything. One thing that I wanted to talk to you about, obviously, is we're in the draft season. The NFL draft is, it's just about 4 weeks away, and as the 3 or 4 people who listen to the show, I'm hoping that number will bump up with you being on it, will know. One area that I take a special interest in is with tight ends. Now, obviously, last year we had Kyle Pitts go number 4 overall to the Atlanta Falcons. I think it's fair to say there's no Kyle Pitts in this year's draft class, so we should just ignore it altogether. Is that right?
You can't ignore it altogether, but that is for sure fair to say. Like last year when we were talking about it, when people would be like, well, because I would say, Kyle Pitts with the Falcons, it's for sure fair to take him at number 4, and people would say you can't take a tight end at number 4, and I would say Kyle Pitts is a unicorn. You can't judge him like you traditionally judge other tight ends. He is not a traditional tight end, and it's a different conversation with him. Now we're back to a traditional tight end class, and maybe even a weaker than traditional tight end class. So it's back to a traditional tight end discussion, and we have to go back to that. So it's going to be more of a boring tight end discussion this time around. So if you guys are willing to listen to that, well, we can do that. But there are some interesting names in this class to discuss. If you want to do that, Neil, there are some interesting guys. And I think there's some interesting sleepers in this class.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those. It's like, how someone once said, a bad pizza is still pizza. We're talking about tight ends, therefore it can't be boring. At least not to me.
Said.
And it's my show, so I'll talk about what I want. Ultimately, people seem to think, I have a target audience. They forget that this is just my vanity project and that I'll talk about what I want. One name that I want to talk about just because it seemed he made quite an impression at his pro day yesterday, and not in a good way. And that was Jalen Weidemeyer from Texas A&M. Has his bad pro day destroyed his draft stock altogether, or can he salvage something in the remainder of the pre-draft process?
It pretty much damn near has, and it's really unfortunate. I really liked him in 2020 when he was playing with a competent quarterback in Kellen Mond. Like I thought his tape was pretty good. Watching him live, I thought it was pretty good. He was one of the better tight ends in the nation in 2020. His tape wasn't nearly as good in 2021 when he wasn't playing with good quarterbacks. Texas A&M's quarterbacks, dropped off a cliff in 2021, and the bugaboo with his profile. It wasn't just the quarterback play. It was the athleticism, and also like his length wasn't. He's sort of a sought-out prospect, just in terms of his body type as well. And you were wondering how he was going to test athletically, and unfortunately, he tested horribly. I don't have his numbers in front of me, but he tested in the 12th or 13th percentile, something like that at his pro day. And because of that, along with his measurables, he's like 6'3", something like that. It's going to make it a long shot for him to get drafted. He may go late 7th round if someone wants to take a shot like that. But otherwise, there's a really decent shot now that he's going to go undrafted. Either way, it's going to be a long shot for him to make a roster coming out in week 1. Otherwise he's going to have to make it now on a practice squad. It's really unfortunate.
A different player who I don't know where you stand at the moment, so we've got the latest information, but a lot of people have as the tight end one of this class is Trey Mcbride. Now, again, I don't have in front of me, I don't have like his athletic times, his 40, his cone, and his short and whatnot. But I did see that he had a 34% target share on Colorado last year. So is he just a receiver, or can he be a two-way tight end, as it were?
For sure can be a two-way guy in that he gives effort as a blocker. Now, is he a traditional inline guy? No. I mean, like he's a bit sawed off, but he's going to give you effort as a blocker. He lacks length, but again, he's going to give you effort. He can be the thing that I like about him is you can use him all over the formation. So he can of course he can be the big slot. You can use him a bit inline. You can also where he can be deployed. You can motion him all around. He can be used as a blocker out of the backfield. Again, motioning him around. And what you were mentioning as far as the usage share out of the Colorado State offense, they didn't have anybody else. They didn't have any other weapons, and so Todd Centeio at Colorado State, they just forced him the ball. Todd Centeio was not a good quarterback, and so it was just forcing all these ducks at Trey McBride, and he was catching them all. So like it was very impressive what he would do, what he did there. He's a very skilled receiver. He didn't get as many touchdowns, but like he was the marked man on Colorado State's offense, and so like between the 20s, they manufactured the touches. That was mostly successful. But like he was just getting triple teamed, in the rare instances when Colorado State would get inside of the red zone. I'm a fan of Trey McBride, but there are some athletic limitations there and limitations as far as his frame, where he's not a Kyle Pitts type or whatever. But I do think there is a shot that he could end up going in the top 50. But he's going to be the first tight end off of the board. But I think you're talking it's going to be somewhere around that 50th slot.
A few weeks ago, I damn him with the correct praise, I think, the great Fran Duffy. In his combine worksheet, he put out the averages of various measurables of all the tight ends drafted over the last 10 years. So I copied it. And I applied it to the tight ends from this year's combine, and one person who seemed to hit most of them, most of the averages at least, was Austin Allen. The only ones he was below the average were his hand size, and his 40-yard dash was just a bit slow. What do you think about Austin Allen as a prospect?
Austin Allen's another guy that he fits into that sort of second or third tier, and when you're trying to like parse these guys out, you look at the kid from Nebraska. He's 6'6". He's 260 pounds, and he fits those measurables. I believe he tested in the 88th percentile, and he played not as good this past year, but his 2020 tape and his 2019 tape, you put him up against any of the guys in this class, I think. He's also a good run blocker. So, and the other thing is, he's a guy who is lined up in line and in the slot as well, so you know that he can do both those things as well, and he's going to give you effort as a blocker as well. So, For me, yes, he's a very intriguing guy once you get into that second or third tier of tight ends in this class. And I think he's solidly a guy, early day 3, I think is where he's going to go.
One name that I've been paying attention to pretty much since it came in, just because there was a sitcom in the 60s and 70s over in the UK called The Likely Lads. So I've obviously, because I'm an idiot and I like making puns on people's names, I've attached myself to Isaiah Likely. I've seen that obviously he scored a boatload of touchdowns last year, which, as you said, is something that Trey McBride couldn't do. And was it last year or 2020, he had a 99-yard TD reception. So he's another one. Could he make an instant impact because of his receiving skills? And then you can work on the blocking on the fly, as it were?
I think so, yeah. I mean, he had one of the best hands grades, going back the last couple of years in this class, over a 90s hands grade. He doesn't drop the ball. His drop rate was only 1.7 last year. Again, very high catch percentage, very high grade. I think he only dropped one ball last year on 77 targets. He's another guy that can move around the formation. Typically, you're going to use him as a big slot, but you can move him around. And this was on a very high ADOT. Obviously, he played in sort of a wonky offense. Coastal Carolina has that sort of spread triple option type thing that they do. But Isaiah Likely, what he was doing, it's he had a high degree of difficulty as far as the receiving routes that he was running, and he always excelled. And so I'm a big fan of what he does, and I think that his game translates to the NFL level. I do think that he will be a success in the NFL, yes.
I think he's one of those that the phrase I've seen is that when it comes to his blocking, he's not like the most aggressive or the most physically dominant, but he loses slowly. So obviously you can build on that.
Exactly. He's the guy that I would compare him to, like Bryant a couple years ago from FAU. You remember that kid? He played a lot in as a big slot, but he wasn't a guy that was gonna plant guys on the sideline sort of a thing. But he's a wall-off blocker. You don't need a guy that's gonna put a guy in the stands. You just need a guy who's not gonna let the guy pass them or whatever. You just need a guy who's gonna wall the guy off. right? Like, you just need your guy not to make the tackle. And when you're in the slot, you know, as a big slot, invariably the guy across from you is a guy that, when you're the big slot, he's a guy who's going to be 70 pounds less than you. All you got to do is make sure that the guy doesn't cross your face. And Harrison Bryant was a guy that did that consistently at FAU. Isaiah Likely consistently did that at Coastal Carolina. He's also going to do that in the NFL. Isaiah Likely also, you know, he lined up about half the time in line. He held his own, at least in the Sun Belt, against the edge rushers there. He was a good run blocker. I don't think that you can put him up against, you know, the ridiculous edge rushers in the NFL. But as a guy who's coming out of the, you know, let's say out of the backfield, you deploy him there. I do think that he's going to be able to win his block coming out of there. And again, out of the slot as well. So the way that you said that, I like that. And I do think that he's going to be able to win his blocks when he's not at a huge size and athleticism disadvantage in the NFL.
Another player who's probably a similar picture from a height and weight point of view. He's not like the typical, well, you say typical, we're in a different world now. He's not like your old school tight end size is Greg Dulcich from UCLA, but I do notice that he's averaged 18.3 yards per reception in his last 2 seasons, and that's on like 68 receptions. So is he in the same vein? He's like a big play waiting to happen in the receiving game.
He sure is, yeah. In that up-tempo Chip Kelly offense, he was the guy that would get up the seam, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson would get him the ball, and he would make plays. He's very, very athletic, ran a 4.69, which is in the 82nd percentile for tight ends coming into the NFL, and he's very explosive. 86th percentile, 10-yard split. His 20-yard split was 92nd percentile. Three-cone was 80th percentile. His broad jump was 91st percentile. So you know that he can move. You know that he can move side to side. And you've seen that on his routes. He's a hard guy to stay with. He always had separation. And the other thing, as far as blocker, when you see the kid, he looks kind of silly because he's got, you know, he kind of reminds me of a Minnesota kid in some ways with his flow, you know, like with our hockey players, our high school hockey tournaments going on right now. And all the kids have the flow, like the lettuce with their hair and stuff like that. And Dulcich at the combine, you know, everyone was commenting on his hair, and he had the mustache. He had the best mustache at the combine as well. So, but like you wouldn't think of him as a tight end that would give effort as a blocker, especially because he's one of those guys as well, where his profile is more of the bigger slot, but he does give effort as a blocker. He's not the traditional inline guy, so he's not one of those you know, sort of LG Crumpler type blockers, but he does give effort as a blocker. There are matchups where he is going to just be physically outmanned, but he is going to give effort every single time against the guy that he's up against. So he's going to win downfield as the seam stretcher, absolutely. But every single time that the guy he's up against, he is going to give you effort as well. That's the reason why on a lot of these media lists that you've seen, he has moved up, including to tight end 1 on some of these lists. Around Indianapolis during the combine, if you were talking to people about who is your tight end riser, he invariably, Greg Dulcich was a guy who was mentioned on so many people different lists. He had a ton of buzz coming out of Indianapolis.
A name that had a lot of buzz before the combine that I'm not sure where he stands now is Jeremy Ruckert, I think from Ohio State. Now, he didn't have like a ton of production. He certainly didn't have like the receiving numbers of like the likes of Likely or Trey McBride. But is that low production because it always seems that Ohio State skill players come into the NFL and we've misjudged them completely? You know, it's like Michael Thomas, the prime example. It's like, oh God, what are they taking him for? Oh, he's an absolute target monster. Okay. Is that similar what it is with Ruckert, or is he limited as a receiver?
I don't think so. I think what it is there was I'm not going to say that it was that he picked the wrong college or he was in a bad situation. It was just there was too many mouths to feed, right? Like you look at just go back 2 years ago. It wasn't just Olave and Wilson, and it wasn't just tossing on Jackson Smith and Jigba. It was also Jameson Williams was there. You literally had 4 first-round wide receivers on the depth chart, and then Jeremy Ruckert's out there, and he's like, hey, can I get the ball too? You know, I mean, yeah, you had Justin Fields as the quarterback, and then last year you had C.J. Stroud, who might be going to the first round himself, but, like, you only have so many balls that you can throw. And, like, when Jeremy Ruckert showed up in Mobile for the Senior Bowl, like, you know, there was so many other tight ends there, you know, where he was the overlooked guy there as well. You know, like when we were looking at the tight end group and talking about the tight end group, the guys that we were excited to watch, it was like the guy we just talked about, like Dulcich, or we were excited to see Cole Turner, or like some of these other guys. And Jeremy Rucker went out there and he made some catches where, like, I was turned to Eric Edholm and, like, we were like, holy shit, you know, like, I'm not sorry for swearing, but like we were like, oh man, like Jeremy Rucker, you know, like, and Rucker made several plays where we were like, man, we got to go back and watch the tape on this kid, because like of course you knew about Jeremy Rucker, it's just he didn't pop off the tape as much at Ohio State because he was doing the little stuff, right? Like he was blocking in line, or he was motioning around the formation so Ohio State could figure out pre-snap, is the opposing team, are they in zone coverage, are they in man coverage? He was doing all this little stuff. He was sealing off the guy on the edge. He was doing stuff like that. But he was never the primary guy. He was never even the secondary option, or even the tertiary option on any single play. So, I want to think about where I was with the Rucker thing. Where was I? Neil, do you remember where I was in that Rucker thing, so I can pick right back up? Oh, Rucker opened a bunch of eyes in Mobile. Like I remember there was one where there was this one play where he picked the ball up off of the carpet, like this pass up off of the carpet, where we were just looking around. Oh man, I can't. I'm sorry, Neil. I think I just lost my whole train of thought with Rucker.
That's okay. That's it does sound like, you know, it's.
Ask me another question and we can pick it back up.
Yeah.
I was really rolling there. I'm sorry, I lost my whole train of thought.
No, it's okay. I mean, from what it sounds like, it's someone who people were aware of, and you know, when he was at the Senior Bowl or the Combine, it was like, yeah, we know about him, but then it was actually okay. We didn't know that.
That's right. Yeah. It's a thing of where a guy he had 4 first-round receivers around him on campus, and so he didn't get the opportunity to showcase his ability, certainly as a receiver. I mean, he could do the little things at Ohio State on the field during the games. You know, again, like the inline blocking, we knew that he could do that. We knew he could do the little things, again, you know, the meat and potato stuff on the field. But the receiving stuff, not as much. He showed us that on the field in Mobile, was making these insane catches. I mean, he probably proved more as a receiver during the practice sessions in Mobile than any of the other tight ends. He was a better receiver on the field in Mobile than, for instance, Cole Turner, who was, you know, I mean, he came into the practices at the Senior Bowl seen as the best receiving tight end, you know, that was coming there. And Jeremy Rucker clearly upstaged him as a receiver at the Senior Bowl. So he was one of the clear risers of the tight end group there, and of these other guys that were more hyped than him. So he came out of that process as a clear riser. Now, Jeremy Rucker, to this point, has not submitted an athletic composite yet. He hasn't done the test. And so to your point about, you know, he hasn't that's where he was the riser to this point. We'll see if we get an athletic profile out of him, you know, during this process. He did suffer a minor injury there. I'm not sure if we're going to get athletic tests out of him, but if we do, I know that he's an athletic kid. So, I mean, there's still an opportunity for him to rise yet, but he definitely came out of the Senior Bowl as a riser.
Of the other tight ends, I know you've mentioned Cole Turner there. Is there anyone else that you can see emerging into this top tier of tight ends this year, or is that pretty much the players we talk about there? Is that pretty much it's going to be one of these guys who's the tight end one?
As far as tight end one, I think I'm not sure if anyone's going to pass McBride, but there are guys like I think that the second tier and the third tier as well. I think those are wide open, and so I think there's absolutely still the open possibility for guys to slingshot up in the same way, Neil, going the other way, where there was the possibility to slingshot down, as we saw with Jalen Weidemeyer. Jalen Weidemeyer came into this process as tight end 2 or 3, and right now he might be tight end like 13 or 14, like after his thing. In the same way, there's possibility for a guy who might have been tight end 11 or 12 to slingshot up. I mean, Jeremy Rucker, he might have come into this process, tight end 7 or 8, and he might be up at 4, or like after the Senior Bowl. Guys that I still think could be on their way up. Jelani Woods, I think is he's a guy who's risen during the process, and he could be on the way up still. He tested in the 99th percentile. He's a long kid that wins up the seam. He moves very well. Dangerous guy. We already talked about Dulcich. Jake Ferguson is a guy that I like a lot. He's a dual threat tight end who excelled early in his career at Wisconsin. If Wisconsin had hit on their quarterback like they thought they were with Graham Mertz, I think Jake Ferguson would have had a better career at Wisconsin. He would have popped more. In hindsight, Wisconsin just should have stayed with the quarterback they had, Jack Cohn. Jack Cohn ended up blooming late in his career at Notre Dame, and then Graham Mertz, this ballyhooed 4-star quarterback from New Jersey that Wisconsin brought in to replace Jack Cohn, he never panned out. So that sort of had a deleterious effect on Jake Ferguson's development. But I like him as a player. Cade Otton is a guy who has a lot of fans. He hasn't been talked about as much, but he could be the second tight end off the board, definitely. Charlie Colar is a guy too that isn't discussed a bunch, but he's a guy that I like too. He's another guy like Ferguson that's a dual threat type guy. He's not terribly sexy, but I like him too. A guy that is more on the sexier spectrum as far as a guy that could rise is Daniel Bellinger from San Diego State because of the testing profile. We knew that he could block. San Diego State, they're the sort of like Wisconsin of the West Coast in the G5. Very physical, run first, run second, run third type offense. So they don't throw as much. But Bellinger tested in the 95th percentile. In fact, I think I saw this morning Kentley Platt from the RAS system. He put out that after Daniel Bellinger's pro day, I believe his RAS got bumped up to either 96th or 97th percentile after Bellinger's testing went official. So his RAS has gone up even more. Because of that, I think he's a guy that has jumped up as well. So those are a couple riser candidates for you guys as well.
The last question for you, Thor. Obviously, great talking about tight ends, but we'll give something to a few other people now, because maybe not everyone loves tight ends as much as me. I can't speak for everyone. The first pick in the draft, still, a lot of for most years at this stage, it's pretty much either one of two people or it's nailed on at one. This year it seems to be a bit more wide open. Who do you see being the first name called?
So before I would have said Evan Neal, but that was before the Jaguars had tagged Cam Robinson and signed the Iowa kid Scherf. Now I'm going to audible to Aiden Hutchinson. The other thing that happened in between then was Aiden Hutchinson went to the combine and tested just a ridiculous freak. I think he tested in the 99th percentile, and that was including the agility drills, which not everybody did. I think after Aiden Hutchinson did that, there's just no. He has answered every single question, including a Heisman-worthy season as an edge rusher at Michigan. I just think he has done everything that you could ask for to be a number one pick as an edge rusher. So I think right now in March, I think I would say Aiden Hutchinson as the number one pick.
See, I would hope that just for myself, because this may be, this is probably unfair to them, but whenever the first overall pick is a tackle, it just seems in the last few years it doesn't pan out that great. It's one of those, that was not a great draft. I think back to 2013, for example. So whereas an edge rusher or a quarterback, yeah, we can get behind, we can get excited about that. That the rest of the draft's going to be exciting.
For sure, yeah, and if they do go tackle, it would be a guy that they're not going to play at left tackle, at least initially, right? Like it would be a guy that they're going to be earmarking for right tackle, at least for the first couple years of their career. And so you would think it would be Evan Neal playing right tackle. I suppose it could be Ekwonu, but I just don't think that the value would be there for that. So for me, I would think it would have to be Hutchinson if at least if Jacksonville is going to stay in that slot. I also think that Jacksonville, at least at this point with the way that their roster is constructed, that they're incentivized to have those phone lines open, right? Because you have Hutchinson there. Thibodeau also is not far off. I don't think from a value perspective. I also don't think Trayvon Walker is that far off from a value perspective. So if you're Jacksonville, you could fall down the board a little bit. And if you're being offered a first-round pick next year by a team that stinks, that you're going to be in the top 5 or top 6 next year in a class next year that's going to be loaded as well, because last year the NCAA waived the eligibility, so you're going to have a more loaded class next year. That's something that you have to listen to, where you're going to get a comparable prospect at the same position. So that's something to look for as well. I think this class is very interesting in that it's something where it's going to be wide open all the way up until the draft opens, right? Like some of these past classes, going back the last several years, we have known, even in February, who was going to be the first pick. I mean, just think about last year. In February, we knew who was going to be the first pick. We knew who was going to be the second pick, right? Like, we didn't know who was going to be the third pick, but we knew who was going to be at least the first 2 picks. This year, we might not know who's going to be the first pick until Roger Goodell announces it.
Absolutely. Thor, it's been fantastic talking to you. Obviously, people can follow you at ThorKU on the Twitter. Have you got anything out coming up that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, so I have a new 3-round mock coming out tomorrow on NBC Sports Edge, so make sure to check that out. And then the next day, for all my degenerate gambler friends out there, I will be putting out my first primer on the NFL draft props. So I'll be giving out my advice for PointsBet just put out their over-under, their first batch of over-under props for the draft slots for the individual players. So I have my thoughts on I think they put out 8 individual over-under player slots. So I have thoughts on each one of them. So I'm going to put out my advice on where you should go for the over-unders for those. So check that out as well.
Thor Nystrom, thank you very much for joining us.
Neil, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
And that was a brilliant Thor Nystrom there, talking tight end drafts. Great stuff, Neil. Really good to see that we're going to get more tight ends. Let's hope that some of them are fancy relevant.
Yes, that would be the hope. I mean, obviously, we want the ones who are going to come and catch the passes. But if you can block, you've got a better chance of getting on the field to catch the passes. So it helps if, as I said, and I have stolen this, I think, from Ben Fennell, but Thor liked it. If tight ends just blocking, just lose slowly.
Yeah, correct.
It's like the Mississippi. It'll just keep rolling. Don't let it roll over you. Just lose slowly.
Awesome. So, Neil, there's loads of talk of free agency, and the way we thought we'd do it on this show was look at the top 5 players, teams, whatever, who would be fancy winners and fantasy losers, and chat about them briefly. So let's start positive, and let's talk about your fancy winners, and who is your first fantasy winner of the free agency period?
First fantasy winner is someone who benefited by what happened around him. That's CeeDee Lamb, who is now, you have to say, undisputably the wide receiver 1 in Dallas. I mean, I know they paid Michael Gallup, but he's coming back from an ACL. No guarantee he's going to be healthy for the start of the season. No Cedric Wilson. He's gone to Miami. Good move, mate. We know that they want to run the ball, and it's nothing more hilarious when you see all these teams basically shedding cap space like it's going out of fashion because they just decide, no, you're not worth it anymore, and the Cowboys are still paying Ezekiel Elliott. But no, I think it cements the fact that CeeDee Lamb is ready to become the focal point of that offense. So we know that it's an efficient offense. It can score points. Generally, we want to get pieces of it. I just worry that CeeDee Lamb is going to start going very, very early in drafts, that he's probably too expensive. But I think there's a good chance that when you do get him, he will pay off. Especially as now the other players who would be, you would think, ahead of him, some of the bigger names, the Tyreek Hills, the Devonte Adams, I don't think they can bank on being the fantasy superstars they've been in the past.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? And we mentioned the quarterbacks in the NFC, and I guess Dak Prescott would put his arm up and say, "What about me?" Fair. I mean, injuries and the end of last season mean that we're still questionable on that. But I do think that he has a lot of talent, and if you have a talented quarterback, you want that wide receiver 1 in your fantasy lineup, and that right now is CeeDee Lamb. As you said, Amari Cooper going to Cleveland. Cedric Wilson gone to be fifth choice wide receiver for the Miami Dolphins. So yeah, no, it makes perfect sense.
I mean, you could argue as well.
The Cowboys fans in the we can make the Super Bowl maybe unbearable at the start of the season because in theory they think they might do because there's nobody else available to do so.
Yeah, but the one playoff win in 6 years might temper that expectation.
Yeah, well, agreed.
And the pooing of their pants against the 49ers last year with their best roster of the last 15 years that didn't win a playoff game. But by all means, crime yourselves.
I mean, let's be honest. The second favourites in this conference are Wales renowned for going 13-3 and losing in the first round at home. So
they love it.
They're in esteemed company.
Literally, the NFC should be sponsored by a decongestant because all it does is choke.
At the end of the day, the NFC is officially over right now. They should sim to Tom Brady playing someone in the Super Bowl. Neil, who's your fancy number 2 winner?
Former teammate of CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, because he's going somewhere to be like he thought he was with Dallas. He is the focal point of a passing offense. Now we know that team wants to run the ball, and we know that everything they do is going to be based off the run with Nick Chubb and with a quarterback who's facing 22 sexual assault and civil suits and is being paid the most guaranteed money of any player in NFL history despite facing 22 civil suits. So, but as they've shown, he's good at football, so it's worth spending all that money on a player who's facing 22 civil suits for sexual misconduct to get the ball to your best wide receiver. So I think it's going to be good because maybe Cooper doesn't catch 120 passes this year, but the targets he gets, he might be a bit more efficient with them. And you look at the rest of the weapons. If they are going to throw to anyone in the in the red zone, their choices are David Njoku, who they've never trusted there, or Amari Cooper. So I think he's a winner because the situation he's in is a lot different than it was a fortnight ago. And maybe from a playing perspective, it's more beneficial for him.
6 games plus of Baker Mayfield and Amari Cooper will be cool. Again, you come back to the same situation, right? Where are the other wide receivers? Jarvis Landry gone. Obviously, Odell Beckham Jr. gone. Do they trust Donovan Peoples-Jones? To be determined. They are a running team, same as the Cowboys. So yeah, no, it makes sense, and understandable why Cooper is a big winner in this situation. 2 Cowboys in the first 3, in the first 2 is shocking, but there we go. Neil, who is number 3 in the fantasy winners this free agency?
Another winner. I hate it's winning is a relative term, but it's another NFC East player, and that's Terry McLaurin, who maybe has not been blessed with the most accurate quarterback he's ever played with. But look at some of the ones he has played with. But he's certainly got one who will target him downfield, which will give McLaurin a chance to actually, churn out some serious yardage rather than just catching it and getting gang tackled. So I think we're fairly confident that if Carson Wentz is the answer, we don't want to ask the question.
Yeah.
And it's also becoming fairly apparent that Terry McLaurin is on the Andre Johnson, Allen Robinson career path of, oh God, get him a quarterback. I don't think Carson Wentz is the quarterback that he's going to want for the next 5-10 years of his career, but at least we know that Wentz is arm arrogance, I believe is a phrase you've used in the past. He thinks, oh, it's all right, I'll just chuck it up there. Well, that can help because McLaurin is not just a, I'll get open receiver. He can go up and win the ball as well. So I think it's a boost for him because of the types of targets he'll be getting in future. Maybe he'll score a few more touchdowns, and instead of being that wide receiver 15, maybe he can push towards being 12, the top 12 if he gets the yards and the touchdowns.
I think he needs support, and I think if I was at 11 now, I'd probably draft a wide receiver. I know in one of the drafts I read today, it was Drake London, the guy from USC. Traylon Burks would probably still be available, or one of the 57 other Ohio State quarterbacks. I just want to make a statement here. Elizabeth Loza, your tweet hurt. That's all I'm saying. Neil, number 4 on the fancy winners.
Another NFC East player, and this is a player who was in the NFC East last year and is in the NFC East again this year. That's Ricky Seals-Jones. Now, people may think and look at this and think, Jesus, scraping the barrel here, aren't we? But, as I put in my article on this subject for 4 for 4, Ricky Seals-Jones at the moment is the leading tight end for the New York Giants. In fact, he's the only tight end on that roster with more than 3 career receptions. The Buffalo Bills last year played at a frenetic pace when the game was within one score. So they averaged 26 seconds per snap, which means they're running nearly more than 2 plays a minute. So they're not going to be substituting. We know that Brian Daboll generally leans towards multiple receiver personnel, but he does go with a tight end occasionally, especially if that tight end can do both, if he can pass the ball and he can block. Last year, during a 5-week span, Ricky Seals-Jones played 96% of the snaps for Washington in a 5-game span, and in that time he was rated the 4th best blocking tight end by Pro Football Focus. This is a team, as I say, unless the Giants focus on defense and nail every single pick, they're going to be behind in a lot of games this year, so they're going to have to pass. They're going to go quickly. They're not going to want to make substitutions. So that means if Ricky Seals-Jones is on the field, he's going to stay on the field, and he's going to get a chance to catch passes from Daniel Jones, who, weirdly, is a more accurate quarterback than what he had last year. So I'm not going to say Ricky Seals-Jones is going to be a tight end 1 or the tight end 1, because I'm not a maniac. But I think if you look at free agency winners, it's hard to say he isn't one because of what he's won. It's not a great prize, but someone's got to win it.
I have no concept of the New York Football Giants right now. Like, a new coach, a new GM, same batch of players, most of which I do not like. Can the coach and the GM turn that round? We're about to find out. I have a feeling that they're going to make a mistake like a lot of teams are going to, and I include the Commanders in this, and be just about good enough to not get one of the better quarterbacks next year, and therefore be stuck in purgatory again for the foreseeable future.
See, I worry, as a fan of an NFC East team, that the Giants are going to turn around, not this year, but maybe in a few years, because they now have grown-ups running the show. The Buffalo Bills organization has shown itself to be stable, sensible, and forward planning. Well, here you've got your head coach and your GM from that organization. So I think, myself more than you, but I'm going to have to enjoy this year of probably the last chance I'm going to get to laugh in the face of the New York Giants, because I think they're going to return to competency very quickly.
I think competency is fair. It comes back to the same question, right? You can have loads of competency all over the place. If you haven't got anyone who can throw the ball, you've got an issue. So they need Daniel Jones to become something that I don't believe he's ever been. Although some people seem to suggest that he has been, but I don't. Final fancy winner, Neil.
A personal favourite player of mine, he's not in the NFC East, I've moved on, who I think has had a massive boost, that now he not only becomes a player that experts and film grinders look on as a good player, but also now we can start thinking, if I can get him late in fantasy drafts, I'm onto a winner, Derek Carr. Because Derek Carr, screw the haters, has been a very good quarterback the last 2 years. He's become a lot more aggressive throwing down the field. The problem that the Raiders have had is that when they get to the red zone, they call in the Gruden playbook, which is, we're lining things up for our kicker. Well, they've just traded for Devonte Adams, who is a maven inside the 5, 10 and 15 yard lines. He's going to score a lot of red zone touchdowns. Red zone touchdowns, doesn't matter where, it's a touchdown. It helps the quarterback. Derek Carr, I think, is going to flirt with 35, 40 touchdowns this year. Yeah, I said it. They're not all going to go to Devonte Adams, but you're going to see Carr's touchdown rate go up because the presence of Adams is going to make the Raiders a much more dangerous team in the scoring areas. So is he going to throw for 5,000 yards? Probably not. Is he going to rush for 750, 800 yards? Certainly not. Is he going to throw for a lot of touchdowns? Yeah.
It's interesting because that AFC West is just absolutely and utterly wild. And people of the UK, we will not see any of these games.
No.
If you are a adult who works full time, 9 to 5, get yourself Game Pass because you're gonna have to be watching the 40-minute versions of all these games. Because I don't think you're staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning, whether it be Thursday, whether it be Sunday night, whether it be Monday night. Because I think 70% of these games are going to be on then. I'd be surprised if there's any games on at 6 p.m. UK time. The fear for the Las Vegas Raiders is they just signed the best wide receiver in the league. I think, or one of. They came second last year and in theory have got better. And I think they're now the fourth best team in their division. It's tough sledding in that AFC West. We shall see if I'm right or wrong, but yeah, that's where we are. Neil, let's move on to fancy losers. Who's your first fancy loser of this free agency period?
Well, ironically, it's Devonte Adams, because you'd think it's hard for the best wide receiver in the game to move to a team, and all of a sudden it's but you're not going to dominate targets like you did on the other team. And he's not, because Derek Carr has Darren Waller. He has Hunter Renfrow. They're probably going to want to run the ball as well because it's what Josh McDaniels wants. So I don't think we can pencil in Devonte Adams for his 35% target share and his 40% air yard share. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think he'll get his. He'll still be a top fantasy performer, but is he going to be the top? No, I don't think he is, because I don't think he's going to get the type of volume that has propelled him over the last few years when the Packers have gone out of their way to not bring in competition for him. So if you're expecting him to be the wide receiver one, I think you're going to be disappointed.
I think that's the thing that people need to understand, and we say this all the time, right? Volume is king when it comes to fantasy, and Devonte Adams has gone to a much more balanced offense, and for a fantasy owner, that's not a good thing. Because, I think Darren Waller over the past 2 or 3 years is in the top 2 or 3 most targeted tight ends in the league. You add in Hunter Renfrow, you add in the fact that you quite rightly point out that you would believe that Josh McDaniels would run more than most, and that's Devonte Adams 150 targets going down to 100 targets. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't get over 1,000 yards and multiple touchdowns, but what it means is he's not guaranteed to get 25 points every week, which it felt like it wasn't with Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. Neil, who's fancy loser number 2?
As we were talking then, volume is king in fantasy football. So a few weeks ago, there was a player who was basically saying, yeah, I'm getting a slight quarterback downgrade, but I'm getting all the targets. And then Tom Brady came back, and then Chris Godwin re-signed, and then Leonard Fournette re-signed, and now probably Gronk's coming back as well. So where does this leave Mike Evans, a red zone weapon? Because he's not going to get, his target share is not going to go up. His targets are not going to go up. His receptions are not going to go up. His yards are not going to go up. His touchdowns might stay the same. So what are we getting here? A mid to high end wide receiver 2, if we're lucky. It's a shame. But yeah, it's a good chance to go and win another ring. I don't give a stuff about your ring, son. I'm going to win my fantasy league. And, your 1,002 yards and 11 touchdowns isn't going to win it for me.
It's crazy, right, isn't it? You look at him and it's like 2018, he was 86 receptions, 1,500 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Last year, he was 74 receptions for 1,035 yards and 14 scores, as you said, red zone. Now, To be fair, what we could say is, and which we always say, is that you can't rely on touchdowns. However, since 2016, 12, 5, 8, 8, 13 and 14. So to be fair to Mike Evans, he's been reasonably consistent in that. But as you said, when he was going to have a crap quarterback and he was the only person to get thrown to, that was good news for Mike Evans owners. Now, you're probably not taking him early in the draft if you're doing redraft, and you might look to shop him if he's in your dynasty, if he's a fixture in your dynasty team.
If he's still on your dynasty team at this stage, I think you're doing it wrong.
Agreed. Fancy lose number 3, Neil.
Again, we come down to this picture, this idea of volume being king. And again, we look at people who have massive outlier seasons in terms of production. And then you look at the steps the teams have made since then. And I'm terribly sorry, but if you think Cooper Kupp is going to be the wide receiver 1 next year, I'll have what you're having, because it's not going to happen, because they've signed Allen Robinson. They want to run the ball because Sean McVay likes to head wreckers. So they've got Robinson. They're still talking about getting Odell Beckham back. Cooper Kupp is going to get his, because again, he's a good red zone weapon. He scores lots of touchdowns. Is he going to get nearly 2,000 yards receiving? Of course he's not. Let's not be silly. They've signed Allen Robinson to complement him. Complement him doesn't mean he's going to be running wind sprints. This isn't the Chris Hogan plan. So Cooper Kupp's volume is going to take a dip, because at one stage it looked like, they might bring back Beckham. I don't know. This could be all look, they're bringing everyone back together again. So, sorry.
Do you think I was speaking to Callum Squires last week, and he was like, is Allen Robinson actually good? Like, as in, we know he's good, but we've always thought he isn't great because he's never had a good quarterback. Do you think he will be as good as he's ever been with Matthew Stafford as his quarterback?
Well, we are talking about a wide receiver who put up 1,400 yards and 14 touchdowns with Blake Bortles. So obviously there's talent there, but the problem we've seen with Allen Robinson throughout his career and going all the way back to college and probably high school is that he has never played with a competent quarterback. He's played with quarterbacks who flashed. I mean, Mitchell Trubisky had a good season once. Blake Bortles had a good season once. But Robinson hasn't been able to establish a rapport with a quality quarterback. So this is the acid test. If he comes in and plays like he did last year, when I maintain he checked out, if he plays like that with Matt Stafford, then we still have the question of, was this 5 years too late when he was still good, when he's still young and had all that elasticity and whatnot? We'll never know. But if he comes in and does what Odell Beckham did last year, but over the course of a full season, then it'll be, again, we can say, if only he'd had this 5 years ago. So it's one of those situations that I don't think Allen Robinson loses in our perception of how he performs this season, assuming he stays fit, because we'll always blame the fact that he's never had a quarterback like this before.
Number 4 on a fancy loser, Neil.
Number 4, there was a fleeting glimpse. There was a gap in the clouds where we thought we were going to get the 3-down Antonio Gibson experience. But then someone from a team of which is of unimpeachable character broke the rules. And I don't mean the rules, I mean the gentlemanly rules, and continued to pursue a free agent who'd said he was signing somewhere else. And Washington re-signed J.D. McKissick. Now, why have they signed McKissick? To catch passes. So what does that mean Antonio Gibson isn't going to do? Catch passes. So again, we're relying on Gibson getting all the work between the 20s, maybe getting the red zone work, but when it's time to pass the ball, it's going to McKissick.
Yeah, it's one of them, isn't it? Like, again, it comes back to are the Commanders better in the backfield because they have Gibson and McKissick? Yes, probably. Is that good for anybody with a fantasy team? No, it is bloody well not. And there was, as you said, a time where it was believed that Antonio Gibson could be a RB1 consistently. I think those days may soon be past.
Especially as we saw last year, if he stays true to type, Carson Wentz showed that he was comfortable targeting his running backs and not just the pass-catching running back. See, Jonathan Taylor had, 50-odd receptions? And Naeem Hines obviously had a lot more. So if Gibson's on the field, he's going to get targeted. But it's the fact that he's going to have to split those targets with J.D. McKissick when McKissick can't do anything else.
Yeah, agreed. Final one, Neil. Who's your fifth fancy loser?
Robert Woods. This time last year, I was Woods over Cup. I was taking Robert Woods ahead of Cooper Cup, foolishly, but I still won our league, so balls is all. I think I actually took them both. I don't think about it. But anyway, now Robert Woods coming back from an ACL injury. He should be fit and healthy. Where does he land? The Titans. The run-heaviest team in the history of run-heavy teams. And he's not even the first choice weapon in the receiving game. There's A.J. Brown. There's Austin Hooper, who, if he can avoid the authorities for stealing $23 million over the last 2 seasons for his 2.7 receptions per game. Yeah, we know the Titans want to run the ball. We know this offense runs through Derrick Henry. And I think it's the fact that the Rams traded Woods not only for a 6th-round pick, but a 6th-round pick next year. Tells you what the Rams think about Robert Woods. So it's hard to... I don't think we're going to see a Stephon Diggs and DeAndre Hopkins, new place, old face, let's roll situation here. I think this is going to be another... Okay, so in 2021 we had Julio. 2022 we've had Robert Woods. 2023, any other aging? Oh, Devontae Parker, you can come. You can be this year's Dunzo wide receiver for the Titans.
I hope you're wrong because I love Bobby Trees. So I would quite like an idea where Derrick Henry can't run as much and they throw it a little bit more and Bobby Trees does what Bobby Trees does. What people will tell you is that Bobby Trees is one of the best blocking wide receivers in the league. So that may have been why he was signed, so we could block for Derrick Henry. Again, don't remember looking and getting many fancy points for blocking wide receivers, but here we are.
No, points per blocking wide receivers. Robert Woods would be the wide receiver 1, and Zach Pascal would probably be the wide receiver 2. Unfortunately, we don't play in those leagues. So, yeah, little warning to wide receivers and tight ends as well. I'm looking at you, George Kittle. Suck at blocking. You'll get thrown the ball.
Correct. Fantastic stuff, Neil. Just as we're on the phone to each other, it looks like Bobby Wagner's also going to the LA Rams, which is a massive, massive middle finger to the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah,
I love that kind of work.
Yeah, it's aside from playing for the Super Bowl champions, I'm wondering if there's 2 reasons this season why he wants to play and staying in the NFC West.
I can't think of them. I can't think of them, Seahawks. Fantastic stuff, Neil. That's it for this week. Before we go, where can people catch you before we are back again?
Well, before we're back again, I have been quite busy for me. Obviously, follow me on Twitter at @NDutton13. I've written a piece on Ricky Seals-Jones for 4for4 Football. I've written a few pieces on free agent tight ends for Rotoviz, looking at Evan Ingram, CJ Uzama. I'm trying to think of the other ones. Austin Hooper and Gerald Everett. Just feels like I write something.
Austin Hooper because there's no way you're just pulling that 2.7 catches per thing for 23 million out your ass.
I also wrote one about Hayden Hurst as well to the Bengals. So there for Rotoviz. For Number Fire, I've written a few pieces on draft props. Looking at the first wide receiver, first offensive lineman, first quarterback to be taken. I'm still waiting for the market to open on the first running back to be taken so I can annoy Number Fire editors and claim that one as well. So, yeah, follow me on Twitter, read all that, shout at me. It's all good.
I am at Mainzy7. Combined, we are waxing_lyrical. If you want to listen to me talk even more about the NFL, I do a podcast for the touchdown.co.uk, the touchdown review. At the moment, we've been doing it weekly because there's been so much news going on. Round table the last few weeks with Callum, with Joe, with Thomas. Had Taib, but Taib was eating without Nabil El-Zar last week. So couldn't on Tuesday, so couldn't join us. That's true. He said he wasn't actually Nabil El-Zar, for those who were unaware, but a lookalike. Imagine being a lookalike in Nabil El-Zar. Anyway, I will stop rambling. I will let you go. Thanks for listening. These top guys are out.